jury included Inga Anderson, the Director General of IUCN, Yasmin Fawd, the Egyptian Minister of Environment, Mark Hutchison, the founder of WildArk, Kathy McKinnon, the Chair of IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas, Christiana Pashkapama, the CBD Executive Secretary, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the Costa Rican Minister of Environment, and Achim Steiner, the UNDP Administrator. The 2018 awards were made up of a cash grant as well as several other areas of recognition, including an invitation to attend the CBD COP14 in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt, just recently held in November, and to receive their awards during the opening plenary and also participate in several other side events at the COP. So the 4 award winners who you'll hear from today, I'll just briefly introduce them, and then we'll move on to the hearing from them. There were 2 special commendations, and the first one was to Candice Stevens of BirdLife South Africa and the Government of South Africa for their solution working with biodiversity tax incentives for the South African Protected Areas Network. The other special commendation went to the Masumi Geo Reserve Foundation in the Philippines, and Billy Demuliang received that award, and for their solution, the Geo Reserve model, creating creative engineering, building sustainable tourism value in conservation areas. The runner-up went to Colin Campbell of Assist Social Capital for the OASIIS platform, which stands for the Opening Access to Sustainable Independent Income Streams for Innovation in Nature Conservation. Sorry, it stands for Opening Access to Sustainable Independent Income Streams. And the winner of the Pathfinder Award this year went to Miriam de Koning from the Presper Orid Nature Trust, or PONT, for the innovative partnership enhancing conservation and cooperation in the Balkans. So it's very exciting, and I think I'd just like to take this opportunity to congratulate again these outstanding solutions from more than 200 nominations. It's fantastic, and congratulations. We'll get straight into it because a couple of presenters have to leave a little early. So I'd now like to introduce Dale Wright, who is the IBA Conservation Implementation Manager with BirdLife South Africa, who will speak on behalf of Candice Stevens, and he'll have to rush off after presenting. So I'll pass it over to Dale. Over to you.
Hi, morning. Thank you, James. And morning in South Africa, but good day to everybody around the world. And yeah, thanks very much for having me. So my name is Dale Wright. As James mentioned, I'm the IBA Conservation Implementation Manager for BirdLife South Africa. But of course, I can't take any credit for the award. Today, I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague, Candice Stevens. She's the Policy and Advocacy Program Manager at BirdLife South Africa. And together with another colleague, Daniel Marnovic, the 3 of us work quite extensively on protected area establishment and protected area policy here in South Africa and at global levels. So today I'm going to work through the work that Candice did, which secured her the special commendation for the Pathfinder Award. Firstly, a little bit of background. And in South Africa, we're a mega diverse country, one of the 17 in the world, but also we have approximately 75% of our land held in private ownership. And so this necessitated the need for a tool which allowed us to declare protected and conservation areas on either privately or communally owned land. And as you can see from the slide here, we offer a range of different contractual agreements to the private and communal landowners, and they move up in increasing responsibility and increasing commitment. And with this increasing commitment, so the landowners receive an increasing benefit for doing so. And generally the highest level in nature reserve and national park is where the biodiversity tax incentive is situated at the moment. So just to talk you through the process of getting the tax incentive initiated in South Africa, when Candice Stevens first joined BirdLife South Africa, there were a number of incentives which had been written into our national legislation, but at the time they had never been tested, and it was felt that some of them were actually not going to be of much value to landowners. So firstly, Candice went around identifying how she could revise these incentives to provide real value. She then underwent an extensive engagement with our National Treasury, as well as the Protected Area Community of Practice, and that resulted in the new amended legislation an incentive known as Section 37D that was incorporated into national legislation. And very soon after that, she was able to test it with a willing landowner at one of our biodiversity stewardship sites. And subsequently, that landowner had the tax incentive incorporated on their tax return. And this was a first for South Africa. And I'll talk you a little bit through the practical example of that tax return towards the end of the presentation. And now we're working towards actually mainstreaming this tax return across those landowners who have committed to the highest level of biodiversity conservation on their land. So what was the innovation? Well, the first point is that a number of factors make this tax incentive fairly unique. One of the main ones is that it is based on the value of land which is declared as a protected area. So this essentially aligns directly with the degree of commitment that the landowner is making, in that they are setting aside this land, often in perpetuity, for biodiversity conservation purposes. And 100% of the value of the land which is set aside is able to be recovered over a period of 25 years, which allows a really long-term, very significant tax break to those landowners. It's also a deduction which is not received in the ordinary course of business. And an example of that is that there are a number of agricultural tax incentives which are available. Many of our private landowners who enter into protected area declarations do so with components of agriculture in their commercial business, and they receive benefits via those rebates and those tax incentives. And so we needed one that was restricted solely to biodiversity conservation. And then the nice thing is that this affects all types of legal entities, private landowners, commercial entities, and our communal landowners, who are also a very big part of the conservation landscape in South Africa. So what is the actual impact of these tax incentives? The main one, of course, is that it secures our key biodiversity areas in the long term. And as I mentioned, we have one of the highest biodiversities in the world, being a mega diverse country. And at the moment, I think we're sitting on nearly 15% coverage in terms of protected areas. And so we do have a way to go to meeting the IUCN targets. And so we need to look at any tools we could have available to allow us to meet those targets. And so we look to the Declaration of Protected Areas. What's important to understand here is that when a landowner declares a protected area on their land, they firstly might be foregoing income, which could be generated off that same land. So for example, if they were able to run cattle on a piece of property, instead, they set it aside for conservation. They experience a loss of income. And also importantly, when we declare protected areas, we know, and as James pointed out in the introduction, that there are extensive management gaps that exist. And what we want to avoid, of course, is the paper park situation from arising. And so we need to make sure that management costs are covered for these protected areas going forward. And so when you're able to offset some of the costs of the declaration, landowners in turn can feed that back into the management of that particular protected area. And this leads to financial sustainability if they're then able to employ people, provide employment for field rangers or ecologists who might work on the property. We're growing jobs in the local economy, and we're able to grow our wildlife economy in South Africa. And what's really important about this is that it is incorporated within our National Revenue Service, SARS as they're known locally, the South African Revenue Service. And so essentially, any landowner could approach their own tax practitioner, and with an understanding of how their tax incentive works, they can then access it. And that I think allows it to be implemented at a much wider scale. So landowners and businesses benefit economically and socially as the tax breaks reduce the amount of tax they owe, and that frees up the tax flow and allows them to then enhance activities such as ecotourism. So what were the building blocks, the fundamental stepping stones to getting this tax incentive entrenched in legislation and now moving it forward into a successful implementation? One of the first is that in South Africa, and it's listed here as point number 5, we are fortunate to have a very strong legislative and policy framework which guides our protected area establishment. The same applies for the privately protected areas. The establishment of the privately protected areas is also incorporated into the legislation, and that provides that supporting framework through which we can incorporate these kinds of benefits. A second important point is there's very strong collaboration across the public, private, and civil society sectors. We have what we call the National Technical Working Group, a Protected Areas Technical Task Team, and these groups meet and they bring together NGOs such as myself, Candice, and Daniel working for BirdLife South Africa, and many others in South Africa who are involved in protected area establishment. It links those NGOs with the government agencies, normally our provincial agencies who are implementing protected area establishment, as well as national agencies. And in this very cohesive community of practice, We thrash out the most important issues facing protected area establishment at the time, and we're able to have very robust debates and move our practice forward. And that, I think, is one of the very strong points of the South African framework that we find ourselves in. Obviously, critical to all of this were the skills that Candice Stevens herself brought to the table, and her niche technical skills in tax, understanding how to engage with our revenue service, understanding how tax breaks could become real for landowners. And that really was what elevated these tax incentives to the next level. And of course, you can't have all of that without going back to the grassroots and ensuring that when you go and work with landowners on the ground, you're able to actually implement these with a landowner and then take it through to testing and success. And fortunately, through our community of practice, we engage a lot with landowners on the ground, and so we have that close grassroots engagement. And so you really have, from a local up to national level, continuum of interactions that sort of provides the basis and the building blocks for the successful implementation of this tax return. So here's just a closing example, just to help you kind of understand exactly how the tax return works. And we take the example of a private commercial tourism operation. In this case, we call them the Big Five Lodge. And they went and decided that because they're interested in nature conservation, they want to operate a commercial tourism area, they secure their land, they set it aside in a biodiversity stewardship agreement. They go for the highest level of commitment, they choose a nature reserve status. And the site is fortunately also obviously a strategic water source area, and it's been a job creation hub as well. People employed, as I mentioned earlier, through field rangers or ecologists. And the effective management of the site, as you can read here, conserves biodiversity, it's able to create jobs. And critically in South Africa, we're a water-stressed country, we need to be looking after our strategic water source areas and our water catchments. And that's another thing that the site does. And so clearly, the benefits here far outweigh any of the costs. But that notwithstanding, we still need to be able to provide some incentive to help cover those costs for the landowner. And in this instance, because the size of the land was 10,000 hectares and the value is quite high because it's being used for ecotourism, it led to a valuation, a property valuation of a book value of nearly $7.1 million. And so that essentially was the value of the tax break that the landowner is now able to recoup over the next 25 years. And this is really critical in this particular example is as you're getting a commercial tourism venture off the ground, you may be running at a loss at first. And in this case, they're actually able to hold over tax gains for future years. And so the sustainability really is long-term. Yeah, so I think that's the tax incentive in South Africa in a nutshell. And I would really encourage you to visit the Pathfinder website. Candice has laid out the details of the tax incentive there. There's more information. Visit our BirdLife South Africa website. There's information on Candice's tax work. There's also information on some of the other work that our team has done in terms of privately protected areas policy. We've recently published a paper regarding privately protected areas and the challenges and opportunities that they face here in South Africa, which we hope would be transferable to other countries as well. So I would encourage you to visit those resources. And also, if you're interested, I'm sure you can drop Candice an email, candice.stevens@birdlife.org.za, or myself, dale.wright@birdlife.org.za, and follow up with us if you're interested in more information. Yeah, so thanks very much. And James, I'll hand back over to you.
Thanks very much, Dale, and I appreciate the time. I believe Dale's at a wedding, so where he's been making this presentation. So thanks for taking the time to do that. And yeah, we'll be sharing these presentations and the video recording of this webinar with everyone who's on this webinar later on, so everyone can have access to follow up later on. I'd now like to ask Colin Campbell, the founder and executive director of Social Assist Capital, to deliver his presentation, and also acknowledging that Colin will have to rush off afterwards, but we will have his colleague Tabitha Ewing to stick around for the discussion and field any questions about OASIIS, their solution that was the runner-up for the Pathfinder Award. So over to you, Colin. Thanks.
Thanks, James. And hello to everybody that's listening. It's quite strange to some extent talking to my computer here in this room, knowing that there's people all over the world listening to this. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. It's an honour to be part of Panorama and the Pathfinder Awards, and we're very pleased to have been nominated and receiver of the runner-up award. So yeah, we'd like to introduce you to OASIIS, which, as James said, stands for Opening Access to Sustainable Independent Income Streams. And this is an initiative which has been developed by Assist Social Capital, which is a social enterprise and community interest company. The platform was launched in Lima in Peru in 2016 at the 4th World Congress of Biosphere Reserves. So a little bit of introduction about the whole process. My background is in social enterprise, which is businesses which reinvest their profits back into social and environmental outcomes. Developed the process in Scotland over the last 20 years. I've worked at a national level in Scotland, working with government, local government, and largely finding ways for grassroots organisations who can come together, become communities of practice, and through that process begin to influence policy and access new resources investment. In 2011, I went to a conference in Sweden, which was Euro Man and the Biosphere initiative. And I was given presentations on social enterprise, social capital, which is the fundamental asset which we use, which I'll say a little bit more about, and also sustainable public procurement. I had never heard of Biosphere Reserves or Man in the Biosphere initiative by UNESCO, but I realised that there was a very strong correlation between what social enterprises are set up to do and the whole notion of trading for the benefit of people and also the planet. So what we were aiming to do was to, from that point on, we began to build an interest in a group of practice of people who are interested in using a business approach to move away from this idea of the extractive economy and to begin to look at ways that we could use local resources within areas of high biodiversity, which delivered both for the conservation aims and objectives of the biosphere reserves, but also provided opportunity for people who were looking for ways to remain in their communities and at the same time have jobs. So we wanted to move away from an extractive community. We also realised through the process that there was a significant disconnect between this whole notion of conservation and how to engage business. And that if you weren't only looking at a financial impact, then there was an issue around how we could demonstrate what was the positive outcome of these kind of businesses. It also became very clear that many of these businesses were struggling to access the right kind of support, specialist support for them, and investment in order to help their businesses grow, which is something which is more typical in the traditional business sector. And that clearly a lot of these entrepreneurs who wanted to respond to the needs of their community were isolated, and often that is actually geographically isolated from their peers, but also from the marketplace. So these are the kind of background about why we began to work on this whole idea of OASIIS, the platform OASIIS. As I said, we're a social enterprise ourselves. Our main focus is on building social capital, which is about connected, collaborative networks of like-minded people. And we also use that as a methodology to demonstrate social impact by identifying, visualizing and quantifying connectivity, which then leads to access to other resources. And it's also an excellent opportunity for people who previously felt isolated to begin to learn much more quickly, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, and they can speed up their process of development. So the building blocks of how we went about this whole process was to begin to look at a replicable framework, which was something that we had already done in Scotland at a national level. And we believe that this can be applied to biosphere reserves, but also any other kind of protected area, and a regional approach to sustainable economic development. So we developed a document which is a skeleton framework which can be adapted to suit any specific area, because often the legal setup in different countries is different, so you need to take that into account. By using the framework, you can design a route map that is specifically targeted at those local communities, the various different social enterprises that are possible in that area, in order to provide opportunities for businesses which are in harmony with people and planet. And so we put together a working group from a range of different countries, and Europe, Asia, for example, and working on these founding principles of public participation, social enterprise, social investment, and sustainable public procurement. So OASIS was the outcome of this process. As we've already said, it's about opening access to independent income streams, and by independent we mean money that is coming through the business as opposed to through grants. We aim to make this as inclusive as possible, so having an online platform means that it's much more accessible to people as we begin to move towards a mobile first process with smartphones, and this is the kind of information that you can get access to anywhere in the world. And we also wanted to raise awareness of this whole idea of social entrepreneurship and how that can build value within this idea of protected areas. Often there's a sense that protected areas means that you aren't allowed to run businesses in them, and we wanted to change that perception and actually show that the protected area provides added value, added economic value to the whole issue of a protected area. And then we wanted to raise awareness, so we began collecting socioeconomic indicators of the impact of these organisations. We aggregated them, and by aggregating them, we can begin to raise awareness of these initiatives to potential investors who often find it difficult to find businesses that are delivering in the areas of interest that they have. So that's the process that we went along. We launched in 2016 in Peru, as I said, and we fairly rapidly, we had 15 biosphere reserves in 11 different countries across the world interested in this. And then we began the process of building, through direct relationships with the biosphere reserves, a list of organisations and businesses that fitted on the platform, and we registered them there. They have their own account. They can add value to their own businesses by raising awareness, but also the collective impact for the protected area, the biosphere reserve. And that allowed us to begin to benchmark the kind of activity that was happening in these areas. As I said, by building this connectivity, we provide opportunities for entrepreneurs who might be very isolated to gain access to new ideas, to information and advice. And this is the other thing that we did with the planning arrangement. We began to tap them into local resources, business support agencies, and work with local government and national government to look at policy that could be supported with the intention of improving the health and well-being of the businesses and providing them with access to money and investment. So we've seen significant progress at a policy level. The work we did ended up being part of the Man and Biosphere Reserve 10-year action plan, which is now across 669 biosphere reserves in 120 countries. So there's a political policy framework, which means that social entrepreneurs are seen as a key resource for delivering on the aims and objectives of these protected areas, and we are able to measure the impact going forward. In order to do this, earlier this year, we launched the first biennial report called Shining a Light in the Anthropocene, which puts a focus on entrepreneurship within protected areas. And we were able to collect information which demonstrated that some of these organisations, which on their own might be relatively small, collectively and aggregated, they have significant impact, financial and economic benefit, without destroying their local natural assets and habitats, and reinvesting that money into business opportunities for young people, for women, and at the same time delivering on the SDGs. With this information, we were able to estimate that there are probably something like 8 million businesses in the biosphere reserves alone who are working in harmony with this idea of trading for people and planet. So the intention is to build on this process, bring together more and more people, and raise awareness of the fantastic work that is happening in these areas. These are just a couple of examples of what we've been doing. So we connected a social enterprise working in art and culture and local community transport in Scotland with an initiative in Sweden, which helped them build relationships. We've been working with Vietnam for the last 4 years. They have now developed a national program to roll social entrepreneurship out across their 9 biosphere reserves. And in Cap Ba Biosphere Reserve, down in the picture at the bottom left, they have a small investment fund, which they are now beginning to build into a social investment fund to look at how they can support businesses. And we connected with social enterprises within a biosphere reserve in Italy, one of them being a creator of a producer of honey. And they have a very well-established honey business, and we developed a webinar where they gave a presentation to a group in Ghana in Bia Biosphere Reserve, which is 6 hours away from the nearest market town of Accra. And that led to the honey farmers in Ghana having the opportunity to sell all their honey to the Australian market. So by building this bridge of knowledge, we've also opened up opportunities and investment opportunities for these businesses that otherwise would have been completely isolated. So as a previous speaker said, we are very happy to engage with anyone who finds this whole idea of being on the platform of interest. We want to open it out beyond biosphere reserves, because there are many entrepreneurs out there who are doing fantastic work that we would like to open up new opportunities to. We're currently talking to UNESCO in Costa Rica about developing a project there across 4 different biosphere reserves. And we're also talking to the Scottish Government and UNDP in their ethical finance initiative to become part of a pipeline of pipelines, which was looking at £100 million ethical bond, which we can help direct to some of these businesses that we've been talking about. So there's a growing number of opportunities, and the more businesses we have on the platform, the more opportunities there will be. So thank you very much for listening. We hope to have the opportunity to speak to more of you in person. Myself and my colleague Tabby, who will be here to take any questions that I've got to leave. And our contact details are here on the last slide. So please do get in touch with myself or Tabby, and best of luck with all your projects. Thanks, James.
Thanks so much, Colin. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and private sector and public sector people who'd be very interested in your platform. And thanks for joining the webinar. I know he's got to rush off to another meeting. And as he mentioned, Tabby will be sticking around to answer any questions you might have later on to do with OASIIS. I'd now like to invite Billy Demuliang. She's the trustee and advocacy officer of Masumi Geo Reserve Foundation to tell us all about the Masumi Geo Reserve in the Philippines. Thanks, Billy, and over to you.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce the Masumi Geo Reserve from the Philippines. We are a 430-hectare conservation area, about 47 kilometers east of Manila. And what we do is we protect historic limestone formations and significant biodiversity in this scarce ecosystem. So our story really started in 1996. So as you can see, the area is completely devoid of life. Trees are gone, the rocks are bare. And as you can imagine, this area was devastated by large and small-scale illegal logging, quarrying, urbanization, and land speculation. And so it was very important to protect the area and conserve it. And after 20 years, this is what it looks like. So after 20 years of hard work and dedicated conservation, we've been able to restore the secondary forest. Almost the entire forest cover is restored, and we have the birds and the wildlife, including a lot of endemic species, now coming back to live with us. So as you can imagine, we are only 40 kilometers outside of our biggest city. And so the birds that you can see here are actually very unique already for that distance from the city. So those are one of the indicators that we are able to provide a sanctuary for wildlife, and of course for people coming from the city. After 20 years of conservation, we realized that it wasn't enough to keep it with us. It had to be sustainable. And that's when we decided to open the Geo Reserve to limited visits for people who want to get in touch with their environment. So through 3 years that we've been opened, we've received tremendous success from all of the visitors that came to the area. And this, as you can see on the screen, is one of our main features or highlights in the trail, and it's called the Duyan. It's an 80-meter long hammock that goes atop the forest canopy. So we ask ourselves through the Pathfinder Award and just looking back on our past 3 years, what really made us unique, what made the GeoReserve quite successful, because as everyone knows, tourism is not new. Tourism is not new in protected and conserved areas. So our unique solution or innovation is actually two things. It's creative engineering together with policy enforcement in promoting long-term and sustainable value for conserved areas. So creative engineering is what brings out or enhances the natural character of the area, while policy enforcement is what preserves and what makes sure that the integrity of the area, including whatever man-made structures are there, are maintained for the long term. So right now, the Geo Reserve already employs about 100 local park rangers, and we get thousands of visitors every year, and we're happy to be able to introduce urbanites, young Filipinos, to what really is the treasure of the Philippines, and that's our biodiversity and our environment. So to go into one building block, which is creative engineering, we do a lot of biomimicry work, which means we get inspiration from what is already in nature. So for example, we have a lot of spiders in the area, and when we want to create a vista point or a viewing point for guests, we think about what are the best materials and how can we create this viewing point without harming the rocks and the natural environment. So this one is an idea that came from one of our local park rangers. It's to build a suspended viewing platform in the shape of a spider web. And to your right, you will see the largest lake in the Philippines, and to the left is the longest mountain range in the Philippines. So this is one of the most iconic spots inside the trail. This is another part of the trail, which is inspired by the shape of a monitor lizard perched on a rock. So this is called the monitor lizard, and this one is the sawa, or the python. So it's a rapid exit made of ropes that gets you from one side to the other at the end of the trail, because a lot of the guests actually get cramps in this area. And we also make use of a lot of local materials that you can find in nature. So these are bamboo, and they are crafted into the shape of a butterfly, just one of the accents inside the trails. And these are discarded snail shells, which we used for the bathrooms or the toilets inside the trails. So I'll just play the short video to give you more of a sense of the expanse of the Geo Reserve. This is one of the highest peaks inside the area, which is called the Tatay, or Father. So this is the Father Rock. Again, this is the sapot or the spider web from above and one of our bridges. And then this is the hammock or the duyan. This is Tatay again, and one of the longest bridges inside the Geo Reserve, which is called the Tulay. Okay, now we go to the second building block, which is as important as the first. It's policy enforcement, and this is informed by the Geo Reserve model. So the Geo Reserve is actually a trademarked innovation in the Philippines. It's inspired by the UNESCO Geoparks, which incorporates a threefold advocacy of environment protection, education, research, and sustainable development through geotourism in particular. So tourism that sustains or enhances the geographical character of a place, including everything from its history, the heritage, culture, food, and of course, the well-being of residents. So some principles that we use in accordance to geotourism is being able to bring out a unique sense of place or the character of a place, being able to use tourism as a means towards benefit of the area. Of course, being able to employ the locals and training them to be able to provide a world-class service. We have high priority to implement quality over quantity. So we implement visits inside the Geo Reserve strictly on a reservation basis, and there's only one group that can come in at a certain time. There's also market selectivity and diversity. So we don't market, we don't sell the visits to the Geo Reserve to anyone. We have a very clear idea of who these will be, and these are people who want to be responsible tourists and who want to get to know nature more. If the expectation is different, we try our best to communicate the real objective of being able to visit the Geo Reserve, such that it is more of a privilege and not a right to be able to enjoy the area. So on education, we do a lot of research with geologists, naturalists, biologists on the different geological formations in the area. We partner with the local schools to be able to inculcate their local biodiversity into their culture and their knowledge, produce a storybook, and conduct geotourism fairs. This is one of what we protect inside, which is the giant cloud rat, the jade vine, which in Masumi is purple, where in other places in the Philippines it's colored jade as its name, but it's different because of the unique karst ecosystem that you can find in Masumi, and of course our shells. On sustainable development, we engage the local people. Some of them are from the indigenous tribe. Some of them are previously illegal loggers and quarry operators. So other important aspects of policy enforcement are visitor management. So we have a digital system which manages traffic inside the Geo Reserve. We have preconditions which they have to agree to before going into the Geo Reserve. And of course, the monitoring implementation by all our park rangers. So we actually have a 3,000 peso penalty for every violation on its first instance. A good news as well is that we will be able to scale this visitor management policies. We recently received a grant from one of the largest tech companies in the world to be able to apply our learnings in visitor management to a mobile app that can be used by other nature-based destinations. So that's one thing that we're excited about. Area planning is also very important. So there are multiple zones within the Geo Reserve, and only in the multi-use zones and the tourism zones are we able to build the structures. And all the structures are actually temporary. As you can see, they're made of rope, they're made of cable. They can easily be changed or moved when needed. And we have a strict maintenance policy. Every week we check all of these structures and we check all of the trails to make sure they're clean and to make sure they're ready for visits and park ranger work. Community benefit is also very important to us. Colin mentioned about social enterprise, and we try to include this in our daily operations. Our food is sourced from the park rangers and from local farms. and we help them be able to create enterprises like soap enterprises, food enterprises, to be able to serve our guests as well. So that's a few things about the Masumi Geo Reserve. You can read more about us on the Panorama page, and you can also follow us on our Facebook and Instagram, and we would love to connect if anybody needs some more information or can contribute to the cause. So thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Billy, and wonderful to see the amazing pictures from Masumi. And I'm sure not only would there be many people listening that can learn from some of those innovative strategies in Masumi, but I think we'd all like to go and visit as well. I'd now like to invite Miriam de Koning, the Executive Director of the Presper Nature Trust and the winner of the Pathfinder Award for 2018, to join us and tell us more about PONT and its Transboundary Trust Fund. Miriam, welcome, and over to you.
Yes, James, thank you. I try to put the presentation on the full screen, so give me a minute. There we go. Yeah, very happy to present Presper Nature Trust, an innovative partnership enhancing conservation and cooperation. Presper Nature Trust, it's a private foundation under German law based in Germany, and it's independent. It's based in Germany because it's a transboundary trust fund operating in the Balkans, and it's funding government organizations, mainly protected area agencies, NGOs and research institutes. It's really focused on co-financing, creating of synergies, partnerships, and to avoid overlap. It's leverage political commitment and government funding, and it gives grants to support capacity development and conservation objectives that includes transboundary activities and essential protected operation cost in line with respective management plans. As you can see, the geographical region PONT is working in, the 3 countries, Albania, it has the Presper National Park in Albania. A similar named park is in Greece, the Presper National Park in Greece. And then we have 4 protected areas in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. That's the Galicia National Park, Pallister National Park, the Presper Lake Monument of Nature, and the Ezerani Nature Park. I want to zoom in a little bit more on the building blocks of the solution and what made PONT create, what made the creation of PONT in 2015. It was really a partnership between the MAVA Foundation and the KfW, that's the German Development Bank, on behalf of the German government. And it's really to support Biodiversity Hotspot. And for these 2 donors that have really invested a lot of finances in conservation in the area to sustain their efforts in perpetuity. Both donors gave an endowment and a sinking fund, which gives us an annual year drawdown of 1.5 to 2 million euros to be used until 2030. But of course, we hope that our endowment capital really start working well, and that it also means that we have enough funding after 2030. Bringing 2 partners together is all about creation of synergies. That means MAVA was mainly working in Greece, also in the 2 other countries, but with a focus on Greece. KfW was mainly working in Albania and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And by joining together, we can cover the entire ecoregion and also work with protected areas and NGOs and benefit from co-financing. The initiative of PONT was really supported by many other initiatives. WWF Greece contributed a lot, Euronatur, Frankfurt Zoological Society. We benefited a lot of the expertise of the Caucasus Nature Fund and the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund. And all of these people coming together created PONT, which is the main building block 1. If we go to building block 2, we look at the PONT strategy, which really promotes transboundary cooperation between government and non-government partners. And this was really, our strategy didn't start from scratch. It was based on 25 years of experience of partners working in the region. It was really about what are still the conservation gaps, what are the gaps in capacities, what are financing gaps. Based on this experience and in consultation with protected areas, we build on that strategy. And it also encouraged long-term transboundary cooperation, although I must say that the formal transboundary cooperation between the countries is quite still very weak. But on a local level, there's a lot of transboundary cooperation despite the lack of these formal institutions, and that we promote via our strategy. So the building block 2 is really about the pond strategy based on previous experiences. If we go to building block 3, what pond really does is this Presper Ecoregion Hotspot, this biodiversity hotspot. It's really to enable an approach that is on the whole ecoregion, and that is really important for the management of habitats and wildlife on the landscape level. And we benefit a lot of working together with PresperNet. PresperNet is a network of environmental NGOs for Presper, with an NGO based in each of the 3 countries. And these 3 NGOs have worked a lot together over the last years, and especially the last 5 years, when they really established themselves and really facilitating this integrated landscape approach. Now that POND is also financing the protected areas, there's also more opportunity for the protected areas in the 3 countries to regularly exchange. We just had a transboundary workshop last week where all the managers came and other staff of protected areas and share lessons learned. One of the examples we support at the moment is a transboundary large carnivore project, and with camera traps in the 3 countries, and also a lot of analysis of large carnivores in the region. We have also supported the opening of local offices of NGOs in the region, so really to have good participation with local people and really have more impact on the ground. That's the building block 3. If we zoom in to the last building block, which is not yet on the Panorama platform, but I mention it, is we are based in Germany. We have an office in Frankfurt that is a shared service office. It's called the Nature Trust Alliance. And this office helps POND, but also the Caucasus Nature Fund and the Blue Action Fund, 2 other conservation trust funds, with their administration. So they help us with the grant payments, doing the accounting, helping with our audits, and of course, very important for Conservation Trust Fund, the investment support to help with investment of our capital and to help to try to generate good returns on our capital. They also work on our website and help us with the communication. And this building block I want to mention because by pooling these resources, we actually save cost on our administrative purposes, and therefore we can focus more on the grant program and also have more means for the grant program. A little bit about the impact, and I want to highlight an example of the Society for the Protection of Presper. It's an NGO that works in Greece since 1991. It was supported by MAVA Foundation since 1991 with long-term stable core financing. And POND took over that financing from MAVA in 2016. But because there's a very long-term stable co-financing and core funding of this NGO, SPP was able also to really attract a lot of other funders to finance their work. And so it really increased their financial portfolio, and they got less dependent on the resources of MAVA and POND from 80 to 64%. Most important, of course, is long-term stable core financing is needed to have that biodiversity impact. And you can see some of the results SPP had over the years, where in 1991 there were 200 pairs of Dalmatian pelicans, and in 2007 they had over 1,000 pairs, which is really a huge impact. Also on the glossy ibis, they had almost a locally extinct bird, and in 2007 13 pairs were back in the Presper area. Some reflections from my side on POND, the solution. Many people have asked me if they think that POND can be replicated. Yes, I think what we finance, core financing for NGOs, standard operations of protected areas. There's a need all over the world to finance that. Often the resources from the governments are not enough, and this co-financing can be very beneficial for these protected areas to be more effective. It of course depends a lot on the willingness of donors and partners coming together for a certain ecoregion biodiversity hotspot to provide this long-term financing, and I hope donors, other donors, will follow the example of the MAVA Foundation and KfW. I'm just a reflection on the Panorama solution approach. I'm quite an ambassador of this approach because I like really to work with it, to write down lessons learned, and also for people to know that if you use this methodology, it's the second time that I make a solution, and it's the second time that over time I've added building blocks, because of course your solutions are dynamic and you always have new lessons learned. When I wrote down this solution in July, I didn't have a fourth building block, and now I have one, so I keep on updating it over time and sharing lessons learned. I here have another solution for you in the last slide with somebody from Albania, Presper, saying thank you and having a natural solution wearing on his head. You see our webpage for more information and our email address to have any information you want to share. Please contact us, and we are very willing to reach out to you. Thank you very much, and back to James.
Thanks so much, Miriam. Now, before we get to questions, and we've got one already, but we'll just very briefly give a quick update on BIOFIN and Panorama. So for those of you who don't know BIOFIN, BIOFIN promotes national platforms and regional and global dialogues that help countries to accelerate the reduction of their finance needs and to the point where biodiversity targets are no longer hampered by a lack of investment. By BIOFIN, we recognise that biodiversity finance is not only about mobilising new resources, and it's concerned with delivering better on what is available, reallocating resources from where they harm to where they help, and acting today to reduce the need for future investments. BIOFINs are managed by UNDP, and already 36 countries have started the process across Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America. BIOFIN uses detailed country-level assessments to develop a biodiversity finance plan, drawing on qualitative and quantitative data and innovative methodologies, as well as expert input. Its flagship publication, which guides countries through this process, is the BIOFIN workbook, which its third edition was launched at the COP recently in November. Here's the workbook cover here, and that's available online. It provides an innovative, stepwise and adaptable approach that enables countries to assess their policy, institutional and economic context for biodiversity finance and map the existing finance solutions. It then measures and analyses current biodiversity expenditures from the public and private sectors, donors and civil society. Sorry, I just realised the screen wasn't showing. And then it makes a reliable estimate of finance needed to achieve a country's biodiversity goals and compares this to the current biodiversity expenditures and other resources available, and finally develops a finance plan that identifies and mobilises the resources and policies required to implement the most suitable finance solutions. And of course, BIOFIN's one of its key objectives is seeking buy-in from finance and environmental stakeholders and decision makers such as the Ministries of Finance and Environment, as well as the private sector and other NGOs, to identify and mobilise policies, resources, institutional capacities to implement the right suite of biodiversity finance solutions for that country. There's lots of interesting examples from across the BIOFIN countries, and which you can see on the BIOFIN website, as well as a new catalogue of more than 150 biodiversity finance solutions that have been catalogued and mapped and that are available for countries to take up. So plenty more to learn about BIOFIN. But I'd now like to get a quick update from Marie Fischborn, who's from IUCN, and she leads IUCN's Protected Area Solutions. She's going to tell us more about Panorama. And Marie, of course, anything more you'd like to add as the anchor, I would say, for the Pathfinder Awards. And I'd just also like to say it's been great to work with not only the winners, but all the people involved from IUCN and UNDP and WildArk and BIOFIN putting together the Pathfinder Award, and it's been great to be involved in this opening, this inaugural year. So Marie, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, James. And I can only second what you just said, and that's been fantastic organizing this initial edition of the Pathfinder Award. I hope my screen is showing all right. So Panorama is an initiative that's really about learning from what works, and you heard it mentioned a few times already in the presentations. It's a partnership initiative that promotes specific solutions for nature conservation and sustainable development. So through Panorama, we identify, analyze, document, and promote success stories from a vast range of so-called solution providers and across multiple interlinked thematic communities, such as protected areas, marine and coastal, or business engagement. You can see the current thematic communities on the right side of this slide, and we just launched the most recent one, business engagement, at the CBD COP, and there are further ones in the pipeline already. So it's open for really any organization or individually to contribute principally, and solutions are subjected to a peer review process and are then published on a web platform. Panorama is based on a universally applicable learning methodology and a rather unique case study format, which breaks solutions down into their replicable core components, or building blocks, as we call them, really recognizing that a solution as a whole, which is an initiative or perhaps a project, is usually completely context specific. But individual elements of that solution might have wider applicability. So those are the building blocks. And you heard them mentioned in the presentations by the winners as they spoke about the components of their solutions. The ultimate aim behind this is really to facilitate replication of these solutions by making knowledge available in a very structured, easily accessible format, and by connecting solution providers with potential replicators for mutual learning from proven success. Panorama combines online and offline peer-to-peer learning. So the backbone is our web platform, which is the database of the solutions essentially. But we also foster learning and provide visibilities for the solutions through, for example, in-person events, webinars such as this one, publications, social media, and a number of other channels and tools. It's currently a partnership of 7 organizations and growing. So we're very pleased that UNDP just recently joined as the 7th Panorama partner, actually coming out of the Pathfinder Award collaboration. So that was a fantastic outcome of that collaboration. And within that partnership, IUCN and GIZ together provide a coordination function. So as I mentioned, it's really open for anyone to contribute. You can see the URL of the web platform here on the slide, so I would strongly encourage you to visit it to explore our solutions portfolio. And you can also find the detailed descriptions of the 4 award-winning solutions on the platform, along with over 450 other solutions, and also contribute your own if you're interested. And just to make the link back to the Pathfinder Award, it was very closely tied to Panorama in that all relevant and eligible nominations through a description of the nominated innovation are represented on the Panorama web platform, so are published as solutions. So if you're interested in exploring other solutions around protected and conserved area financing and resourcing that we sourced, so to say, through the award, then do visit the platform as well. And we're very much looking forward to being involved in future editions of the award. Thank you. Back to James.
Thanks so much, Marie. And I must say the Panorama platform, it does really provide a succinct and concise way of presenting these solutions, and you can really download a lot of information in a short time, and it's a great platform.